Hey everybody, Black Spring here on your Saturday. Hope everybody's doing well and you are staying safe, and welcome to Black Spring. Now, this week we witnessed the Trump administration and the Pandemic Task Force mobilize American resources, anywhere from sectors to government policy, to flatten the curve of the pandemic. Now, in this particular installment, we will take a look at two things. We'll just have actually just more of one thing. We'll have one comment, a little bit of comment on actually something that the president spoke of during the press conference about Americans actually coming together to mitigate and to mobilize in this crisis. We see that coming from the auto industry, and we see it coming from many resources. And that is a spin that you will not find on the mainstream media. So in that, I'd like to first bring you to, we'll first have a little bit of commentary on the actual mobilization of the industry. I'd like to speak to the industry in which it is ramping up its support and unity for the president's plan. I'd like to welcome everybody to Black Spring with Autumn on your Saturday. Again, if you're new here. Now, the president mentioned in the actual press conference on yesterday that he had a tremendous response from different industries. So this particular article, it comes from massdevice.com. And of course, in this particular segment here, I will just offer, I'll put this link in here for you to read it yourself. But it talks about here, Bloomberg reported that General Motors CEO Mary Barra is offering automakers closed factories for the production of ventilators as the crisis persists. The report said that Barra has made several suggestions regarding how GM could help the government, but the government has not yet formally requested the use of the GM's facilities. Continue, GM's previous efforts include using plants for production tanks during World War II, along with other auto manufacturers. A report in The Hill said it is unclear how long it would take for GM to potentially develop manufacturing capabilities for ventilators. Tesla co-founder and CEO Elon Musk took to Twitter to say that the company, quote, will make ventilators if there is a shortage, end quote. Musk made the comment in a thread in which he claimed the panic surrounding the virus is more dangerous than the virus itself. And he also used the social media platform to question if there is in fact a shortage of ventilators. So there you have, there's your segment on the actual mobilization of the American industry responding to the task force and Vice President Mike Pence's call for actual assistance in a mass production of needed N95 mask. So also I would like to take you on to the very next segment, if you'll go with me here. This comes from our vetted source, the newamerican.com, and you will find that particular link in the description box as well. Now here, this is from our vetted source, the New American. The U.S. Senate proposes a $1 trillion stimulus to, quote, remedy economic shutdown. Now this comes from Christian Gomez. Now, in response to the Chinese Communist Party pandemic and subsequent lockdowns and shutdowns of business as mandated by state governors across the country, lawmakers in the U.S. Senate have drafted a $1 trillion stimulus package, the largest in U.S. history. Congress has already passed two bipartisan government-funded aid packages, both which President Trump has signed. One, the Pandemic Preparedness and Response Supplemental Appropriations Act of 2020, H.R. 6074, which provided $8.3 billion in emergency funding for federal agencies and first responders, and two, the Families First Pandemic Response Act, H.R. 6201, providing $104 billion for emergency paid leave, expanding unemployment insurance, and to cover the cost of pandemic testing. Now, continuing, the current bill, known as the Pandemic Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, or quote, CARES Act, S 3548, dwarfs the first two at about $1 trillion, which will include rebate checks for households that meet certain requirements. During the March 17th Pandemic Task Force press conference, Secretary of Treasury Steven Mnuchin urged, quote, we're looking at sending checks to Americans immediately, and what we've heard from hardworking Americans and many companies have not shut down, whether it's bars or restaurants. Americans need cash now, and the president wants to get cash now. And I mean now, in the next 2 weeks. According to a 2-page Treasury Department document entitled, quote, Stage 3 Proposal, end quote, the federal government plans to issue $500 billion in direct payments to individual taxpayers in 2 rounds. One, $250 billion to be issued on April 6th. Two, $250 billion to be issued on May 18th. These payments will be administered by the IRS and the Bureau of Fiscal Service. As of March 20th, the bill drafted by the Senate Republicans would provide direct payments up to $1,200 for individual taxpayers, and $2,400 for married couples, and $500 for each child in a household. The rebate checks would start to phase out at $75,000 in adjusted gross income based on the 2018 tax returns. The Senate bill includes establishing a $50 billion lending program for the airline industry, so long as they keep flying, $8 billion for cargo air carriers, and an additional $150 billion for secured lending and loan guarantees to assist other severely distressed business sectors, and $300 billion in forgivable bridge loans for small businesses. The bill also reverses previous cuts to Centers for Disease Control, CDC, and the National Institute of Health that President Trump proposed in his February budget proposal for next year. On March 19th, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell told CNN about the bill, quote, the key is this clearly is to get past this, to bend the curve, as Dr. Fauci continues to tell us. And that requires this kind of isolation that shuts down the economy. So it's our job to step in and help people through what we hope will be a short-term shutdown of our economy, end quote. Dr. Anthony Fauci is the director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases. Despite overwhelming support from both Republican and Democrat leadership, not all Senate Republicans are enthusiastic. Quote, right now the plan around here is basically to just start shoveling money out of a helicopter, and the most important debate is whether or not Republicans or Democrats get to shovel the money first, end quote. Senator Van Sass said, quote, this is a bad idea. We don't need a policy where Washington, D.C. handpicks winners and losers, end quote. In fact, none of these measures proposed by Senator McConnell, Secretary Mnuchin, the White House, and others on Capitol Hill are constitutional. Nowhere in the Constitution is Congress or the executive branch of the federal government granted extraordinary powers during times of an emergency to stop, subsidize, or take over large swaths of the economy. The federal government is promoting government-funded socialism in order to alleviate the financial impact of government-mandated shutdowns of businesses. Though President Trump was elected to, quote, drain the swamp of big government, should he sign these measures into law, he would be condoning big government programs strongly resembling FDR's, quote, New Deal, end quote. So yes, ladies and gentlemen, we have these measures, and of course you have the response from different members of Congress. Now, in a previous video, I did speak to the idea of course, the UBI, which was a part of the platform of the former presidential candidate Andrew Yang, which I do not submit that the president is parroting those ideas, or that that this is a form of socialism that he is proposing this type of relief as a form of socialism. However, this is also, to many, this is a form of relief that would mitigate and maybe even quell some fears or comforts to many Americans, whether no matter what populist group they may say that he's trying to appeal to. There, in many ways, of course, socialism is not a part of the Constitution. However, we do know that the president, this is an unprecedented event, and prior to this, the U.S. has not had a plan per se for any type of biochemical weapon or attack, or however you may want to coin it. So I do appreciate everybody tuning in to this segment, and let me know what you think in the comments. Please, if you can, hit the subscribe or like button to help with conservative voice suppression, as well as I'd love to know what your thoughts and concerns are, as always, here on Black Spring with Autumn. I'd like to thank everybody for tuning in to this segment, and I'll see you next time on Black Spring with Autumn.